Stunning new details have emerged in the Biden family corruption in Ukraine. The newly revealed audio recordings and documents provide supporting evidence implicating Joe Biden, his son Hunter Biden, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken in widespread corruption in Ukraine. The reason we know this is thanks to a former member of Ukraine's parliament, a man by the name of Andrei Derkach. Now, Derkach, you'll recall, exposed the Biden family corruption in Ukraine and then suddenly disappeared. Turns out he went into hiding after both the United States intelligence apparatus and the DOJ and the Ukrainian government tried to punish him, to have him killed. Our next guest managed to find him and sit down for an extensive interview with some explosive new information about the Biden crime family. Simona Papadopoulos is the former attorney for the president of the European Parliament, and she's a journalist. And she joins us now. Simona, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, I'd like to remind the audience who we are talking about. Andrew Derkach is this infamous character mischaracterized by the Western media as a Kremlin agent for one single reason, and is to expose Biden's family corruption in Ukraine. So as we now got a little accustomed to, everyone who outs facts of corruption of Biden's is targeted for being a Russian agent, and every fact, heavy evidence supporting those facts is a Kremlin agent himself. So Andrew Derkach had an extensive career in politics. He was trained in the KGB. I would like to stress this point because it's one of the questions I made to Andrew, and precisely is that why people characterize you as a Russian agent. And actually, he said that his background as education as KGB, it's actually affecting the perception, has been played in the public perception, but actually served his main career, which was a career as a politician, a public servant, was committed to expose corruption in Ukraine. Now, while he was doing his job for his country, emerged facts of corruption that lead to a very well-known name in America, and his name is Joe Biden. He disappeared for 2 years after he leaked these infamous Derkach tapes, which are actually the audio recordings of the conversation that Joe Biden, at the time he was vice president of the United States under the Obama administration, had with former president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, in which basically threatened him to withhold $2 billion to Ukraine of American taxpayers' money in case in case Poroshenko wouldn't fire the general prosecutor, Shokin, that was looking into Burisma. Burisma is the energy and gas company where Hunter Biden, completely unqualified for the role, was sitting at the board of administrators, so for $80,000 amount. Burisma has been involved in a money laundering scheme and corruption. He provided massive documents, court orders, wire transfer, proving those allegations. But nevertheless, when at the time Derkach handed these documents to Rudy Giuliani, who opened an investigation about it, Rudy Giuliani has been under attack and actually has been disbarred as an attorney and has been targeted as a FARA violator, like a Ukrainian agent. Well, this is a very long story, dense of information, but it comes to actually a really simple message. And it is that everyone at national and international level who has exposed Biden corruption at any time, or had provided, even worse, supporting evidence to those allegations, has been targeted by a corrupted DOJ. But now let's get back to my most recent interview. When I met Derkach in Minsk, not in Kiev this time, my first question has been why we are meeting in Minsk, why not in Kiev in Ukraine? And actually his first answer was that he has been victim of an assassination attempt, further a meeting that Blinken had with Zelensky, and in which instructed Zelensky to resolve the Derkach issue, basically suggesting to use an unlawful method to do that. And Derkach alleged that he was explicitly referring to physical elimination. So what's the new evolution of this crazy story? From a corrupted government, so Biden bribing Poroshenko to cover up for his son crimes in Ukraine, we have a mafia government. We have a criminal organization in which inconvenient voices are instructed to be taken care of, basically eliminated. So this was basically the most shocking revelation of this interview. But we have more. We have more, and as we walk through this long, through 3 hours overall that have been cut in shorter segments, we can see many documents and new audio recordings that link to the involvement of other people that, along with their catch, has been working on exposing corruption of Biden again, and all of them have been targeted as well. And not only targeted by the DOJ or by incredible made-up persecution, as I say, but even their life is in danger. Actually, it was pretty crazy to hear their catch making an appeal to Congress, asking to basically save the life of Shokin, the same general prosecutor that back on time was fired because of Joe Biden intervention in Ukraine.
So you referred, of course, to the threats to his life, the threats to other witnesses' lives. Did he come face to face with any of these threats directly, or was it indirect that he was told about these threats to his life and that he needs to get out of Ukraine? Therefore, that's why you met with him in Minsk.
Well, he came face to face with this man who characterized as an Albanian citizen, who was actually a hitman, and he was saved by his as a team providing for security, and he was able to actually escape the Ukrainian territory and find exile almost in Minsk, where I met him.
Киллеры это были выходцы с Восточной Европы, а непосредственным исполнителем должен был быть албанец. К сожалению, произошла утечка информации, и как бы эти люди смогли уйти с территории Украины безнаказанно. Не все, правда.
So he had to face directly that threats, and then, as he also mentioned, he has been busy in, working and exposing corruption ever since. So has been resilient in this purpose.
If you knew that this would be the outcome, would you still publish this tape?
Я бы все равно публиковал эти пленки, я все равно бы боролся с коррупцией. Я, собственно говоря, этим занимаюсь и сейчас.
Can you talk more about the Antony Blinken piece of this, which is, so he's actually meeting with Zelensky and asking to resolve, take care of Derkach, like to go after him in not so many words, but we need to get rid of the Derkach problem. Can you elaborate more on Antony Blinken's ties to all of this?
Well, according to Derkach, during this interview actually revealed that this meeting between Blinken and Zelensky happened at the eve of the start of the military operation, so before the start of the war. The main concern, again, was to silence inconvenient voices, and that's how he has been informed by many different sources that were present at this meeting, that Blinken was actually quoted to say, "Let's resolve the Derkach issue." And he was pretty much concerned by this individual. We have to remind that Derkach has been sanctioned by the United States ever since. So his life drastically and dramatically had changed already since the very first moment he leaked these audio recordings to Giuliani. But then he kept working on exposing corruption, revealing new documents, and at this moment Blinken fly to Ukraine and give precise instruction, again, to cover up for Biden and this, of course, corrupted government. So he quoted Blinken pronouncing this word, and again, I am referring to what Derkach has told me during the interview, and this: we need to resolve this Derkach issue. And he was pretty confident that these words made reference to unlawful method of physical elimination of this persona, and that's why he decided to flee. The country served for 7 mandates as a parliamentarian to be actually a hostage of exiled in Belarus. It's actually a crazy story if you think about it. And again, one of the questions I made: why did you do that? Did you trust that the United States could help? And actually, he told me United States was not my concern. Joe Biden fate is not my concern at all. I was investigating on the corruption of my country, which is my job, has been my job ever since I represented Ukrainian people. And as a result, I found out this fact of corruption that I shared with the American government and Giuliani for their knowledge. But my concern was Ukraine, was never Joe Biden, was never America.
Let's talk about the Hunter Biden piece of this. Of course, the Democratic government, the Biden administration, the liberal media in the United States has downplayed these connections, the Burisma connection. They've called it, of course, propaganda. They've called it Putin propaganda, talking points, and all of this. Even in the past few days, we've seen Nancy Pelosi, former Speaker of the House, saying that these types of discussions, it's Russian propaganda, Putin talking points. Can you talk about what he showed you related to Hunter Biden, documents, audio recordings, when you sat down with him in Minsk?
Well, it didn't show me anything strictly related to Hunter Biden, but it showed me the lawful activity Burisma was involved into, and that resumed to court orders. By example, we have a court order in which the owner of Burisma, after being caught in a bribe of the size of $50 million, not 6 million as it was in the first documents detailed, he has been awarded as a result only with a fine of $1,800. So this shows which level of corruption. Even the same anti-corruption body and the DOJ has been involved into covering up for these activities to give the perception that this Burisma was doing actually nothing wrong. But there is even more to that. It showed me other court documents showing the size of the bribe was actually 50 millions. In the first time we could track 6 millions, where these other 44 millions have gone. It linked this 44 million to the funding of terroristic activity of the allies of Biden in Europe, and they believe they have been involved with the explosion of the Nord Stream as well.
По работнику Буризмы, господину адвокату Кичи. Это английский вариант. Давайте напомним, о чем идет речь. Самая крупная взятка в кэш в Европе. 2020 год, $6 миллионов в пакетах, переданных за закрытие дела о Буризме. И вот я вам передам документы, там есть рапорта Кулика на эту тему. О чем идет решение суда, вот о чем речь идет в этом решении суда. 21 апреля 2022 года украинский суд передает вот эти 6 миллионов наличного кэша по согласию с представителями Буризмы в распоряжение воинской части Главного разведывательного управления Украины. Вот здесь вот есть номер этой части. Это секретное решение, его еще никто не видел. Через промежуток времени начинают взрываться северные потоки. Совершаются покушения на Дугину, Прилепина, Татарского. Руководители спецслужб Украины не скрывают, что они проводят политическое убийство, террористические акты за внебюджетный кэш. То есть, еще раз, партнеры Байдена по коррупционному бизнесу в Украине финансируют террористические акции, таким образом уходя от ответственности за коррупцию в Украине.
So we're talking about a massive information, and my biggest concern ever since has been, would you testify to Congress if you would be granted the opportunity to do that? Because, you know, one thing is to talk to journalists or to share this information with investigative lawyers. Other thing is to actually lead accountability, provoke an accountability. I believe our elected officials should look into these documents more than I did, more than anybody else did, and you know, understand that Giuliani at national level and Derkach as international foreign witness have been targeted for the same exact reason. So what are we witnessing right now? What are we looking at? Incredibly crazy persecution of Donald Trump, who has been condemned to pay $83 million to a woman that back on 30 years ago made up she was raped by him, while we have actually factual evidence of corruption, crazy evidence of corruption that stay completely unpunished, and nobody dares even looking into that. I think the strategy of deflection of, as you mentioned before, everyone is targeted as a Russian agent or repeating Putin talking points. And again, I've been accused of the same ever since I set my feet in this country. Before even I started to work as a journalist, because I married George Papadopoulos, and of course I was a Russian agent myself, simply because of that. But you know, I became disabused to this technique, and To be quite frank, I think it's a strategy that lost its power over time. You have an accent of Puerto Russian, you have blonde hair, you're Russian. I mean, like, it's such a simplification that is so ridiculous at some point, but people now don't believe it anymore. And so the first step, I think people are aware that this is, of course, a deflection strategy, but we need to reach the second step, which is accountability. Because until the sitting president will be held accountable for everything he has done, the DOJ will be still his weapon.
Right. Well, let's talk about the DOJ a little bit. Part of the revelations from this interview, your interview with Andre, is over the FBI and undercover agents and the intelligence in the intelligence community and using the DOJ as part of this. Can you talk about the undercover piece of this, the agents involved, and how they were also complicit in this? I don't think most people understand about how the FBI and the DOJ were really complicit in this cover-up.
Yes, because there's been like this collective effort to promote a certain agenda, and this effort included covering up for Biden's crimes above and projecting and using his crimes on the people on the opposite side. So I make an example. We have seen many people being accused of FARA violation. Well, FARA is the Foreign Agents Registration Act, including Rudy Giuliani. Why was accused of that? Because he was looking into Biden's crime in Ukraine, using the documents provided by the Ukrainian parliamentarian at the time. Andrew Derkach, as a foreign citizen, has been accused of has been sanctioned and being portrayed as a Kremlin agent. And the same Donald Trump, when at the time questioned the Ukrainian government about Biden doing in Ukraine, they tried to impeach him. So what we are looking at a system that criminalize everyone who looks into facts of corruption and don't criminalize who commit those facts of corruption. And this is crazy. It's simple as that, but it's that what is happening here. So when we talk about DOJ, weaponized DOJ, when we talk about federal agents at the service, our institution at the service of an agenda rather than the service of the people to provide the transparency, justice, and law, just provide law and order, we have an entire apparatus which is a weapon in the hand of today the Democratic Party. This should be a problem that involves us all, independently by the political affiliation or beliefs, because when your institutions are at the service of a political party rather than the people and the citizen, there is a deep state, a bunch of bureaucrats ruling America that you're paying taxes for, and these taxes goes at the time to bribe Poroshenko or to pay federal agents that work for the government but actually don't work for you. And that's the real problem.
What were the biggest concerns on the part of the Biden team and the DOJ in this cover-up? What were they scared would come out? What were they worried the American people would learn and therefore went to such great levels to cover this up?
Well, first and foremost, you have to remind what Joe Biden, the position that Joe Biden had at the time. He started to entertain these affairs with Ukraine. Like this, he was vice president of the United States under Obama. So these roots to the entire Democratic apparatus, Obama in first place and Hillary Clinton. When we talk about electoral interference and we look at the motives that lead a foreign country to interfere in the election of another country, let's make ourselves a question. What was the interest of Russia to have Trump as president? None, because Trump, besides, of course, trying to promote healthy relationship with every foreign players without building up a monster for no reason, antagonize the big powers for no reason. He implemented sanctions to Russia as soon as he was in power. So this narrative doesn't make any sense. On the other hand, we have Joe Biden that already in 2014, he was reaching his family through Ukraine. Of course, this information that Ukraine has on Joe Biden is a huge leverage. And later on, we see how much of the war in Ukraine has been funded by United States of America, that are more worried about Ukraine to protect their borders and to to take care of the inflation and the economic crisis. So these are obvious facts that should make everybody aware of the real motives behind this eventual electoral interference we love to talk about, thinking about Russia. What's the interest of Russia in having Donald Trump? No. What's the interest of Ukraine in having Joe Biden? We have seen follow the money. Follow the money, you have the answer.
Right. Follow the money right into their bank accounts. Exactly. When you look at the future now for this this probe, this corruption probe, and where we go from here, is Derkach prepared to come to the United States or testify in Congress? Has any member of Congress reached out to him to testify and come to the United States under some sort of a protection?
Well, I hope that this interview will lead to any of the official in Congress to invite him for a testimony, or invite one of the other witnesses he mentioned in this interview to testify in Congress those facts of corruption. Because once we acquire those evidence, there is only one option possible and would lead impeachment of Joe Biden. Now, Gercaccio stressed in many occasions and many times that he had absolutely no interest whatsoever in having Joe Biden removed. He basically said that I was doing my job in Ukraine, and as a result, I emerged fact of corruption on the Biden side. Now, America sanctioned me, but I was doing my job in Ukraine. So that's to, of course, I don't know if he would accept to be a witness himself, consider that this is pretty much the answer he gave me. But I think he would like, it was actually giving the pattern for the Americans to open investigation and interview, for example, right now, people like Shokin. One of the new documents he provided was these audio recordings that he told me was leaked by the SBU, so the Ukrainian Secret Services. And they are the conversation between Shokin and two Congress American lawyers, Greenberg and Aborisk. And in this conversation, Shokin is actually talking about the facts and knowledge during his work as prosecutor. And he also said that as a result of his first outing of these effects of corruption, he has been held hostage in Ukraine and he can't fly from Ukraine. So this would be really a key witness according to the speaker of my interview, and actually somebody I would really much love to interview as well. And it's all it comes to set the stage for investigative patterns based on evidence and not deflective propaganda. Let's look into facts rather than targeting the messenger as a Kremlin agent. Let's see what this messenger is bringing on the table. I think it's an easy exercise we should learn in the United States right now, to look into facts and start to stop this blah, blah, blah campaigning of, oh, this is a Russian agent, this is a puppet, Putin puppet. I mean, I believe Putin and all this side of the world are the biggest fishes to fry right now, and definitely if there is any country, foreign countries taking billion and billion of dollars from the United States, this is Ukraine, through Joe Biden.
So these audio recordings, are there any other audio recordings that he revealed to you that were eye-opening, that revealed deeper corruption with the Biden administration? Well, they weren't even in the administration yet, but the audio recordings of then Vice President Biden, his son Hunter Biden, and Antony Blinken.
Well, there is no actually audio recording of Blinken giving this instruction. He has a witness reported what happened during this meeting. Then we have audio recordings leaked by the SBU, and they shared recently with me about his conversation between Shokin and these two American lawyers, in which he talks about Biden corruption, and he asked basically to be helped because he's stage in Ukraine. And then we have a bunch of wire transfers documents, for example, in which we can see how this money laundering scheme actually happened, also through other court orders where the people working for the money laundering company, the companies where this money was laundered, worked. And we have a lot of court decision that shows unaccountability, but also a lot of other documents that shows actually this corruption is that took place at the time where Hunter was working for Burisma. So this idea that Hunter was working for a completely normal company, doing his job as a competent person, completely collapsed, because ever since have been other investigation, the same Ukraine. And we have witnesses, key witnesses, people involved in this money laundering scheme. Hunter Biden, when you find a laptop, you find documents, one name always emerges, and it's the one Hunter. But of course, we have seen many investigations taking places in America ever since. None of them really held any of these players accountable. We heard their names many times, we've read their stories in headlines, but I don't see much attention. So thank you so much, first of all, to giving me a platform to talk about this interview, because I think it should interest a lot of people.
Absolutely. One of the big, we'll get you out of here on this, Simona, which is one of the big defenses of all of this is that, well, my son Hunter wasn't doing anything wrong. And then, of course, it metastasized into, well, I didn't know anything that my son was doing. I wasn't involved in his business dealings at all. I had no knowledge of those business dealings. I wasn't actively involved in those business dealings. Did you learn anything from Andrei Derkach that turned that narrative on its head?
Well, it's the opposite. First of all, Hunter Biden was doing something wrong, and the court orders that Derkach handed me and that I published on my social media prove it, the money laundering scheme and the corruption that and the bribes, the huge bribes. We're talking about 50 million cash, a bribe. We're talking about massive corruption. These are all documented in tangible evidence. And also, Joe Biden claims he was not aware what Hunter was doing. He was not involved. Well, we have audio recording with his unconfutable voice showing that he's well aware what his son is doing, and actually is bribing the president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, to fire the prosecutor looking into his son wrongdoing with Burisma, with using American taxpayers' money, $2 billion. So he was well aware, and we have evidence of it, and there is nothing they can object besides that the speaker providing this evidence is a Russian agent, of course.
Right, that's the defense. No Russian agent, Putin apologist, of course. And yet they continue to go after Trump, but there's no appetite on the side of Democrats to look into this. If this were Trump, if this were a Republican, it would be every newscast, every night, front page story, on every newspaper would be covering this. Simona, thank you so much for your work on this. Thank you for your interview on this. Thank you for these unbelievable revelations. I encourage our audience to dive even more deeply into it. Watch the full interview, watch the multiple-hour interview, and you can see all of the layers of corruption that are here. We just barely scratched the surface on some of these. Simona, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
I really hoped you enjoyed watching this video. YouTube thinks that you'll actually like this next video right here. It's personalized based on your own viewing habits. So if you watch the video, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think about it, and we will see you next time, everyone.